The Paper Mario trilogy is one of my favorite series of all time. It features incredible stories, amazing soundtracks, fantastic gameplay, and of course, wonderful characters. If you haven't experienced the magic that is Paper Mario, I highly recommend you check it out. It's almost a cliche to say at this point, but in my opinion, the game that nearly perfects everything is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. All of the elements just flow together perfectly here to create an amazing system. For this video, I want to focus on the characters of the game. More specifically, I want to look at one of your partners that accompanies you on your journey. You probably know that I'm talking about Vivian based on the title and thumbnail. While she isn't exactly my favorite partner to use in battle, Vivian stands out amongst the fans for a very specific reason. Her story arc is very strong, and it's something that a lot of people relate to. Before I dive deeper into this subject, I want to throw up a blanket trigger warning for abuse and transphobia, as those are themes that are going to be repeatedly appearing. At the start of the game, Vivian is very poorly treated by her sisters Marilyn and Beldam. Even though she is miserable, she sticks by her family until about Chapter 4. At this point, Mario gets his body stolen by the Duplighost Dupless and is left to wander the world as a shadow. He eventually finds Vivian and helps to console her anxiety. Both of them are currently at a low point and feel lost together. Instead of her family, she now pals around with Mario, eventually finding out his true identity before running away. Vivian eventually returns to the party after realizing that Mario has been the only person in the world to ever treat her with a modicum of respect. Despite previously being an enemy, Mario helps adjust the rest of his partners to her presence, and eventually everyone in the party becomes good friends with her. We don't learn exactly what Vivian is or was until late into the game. As it turns out, Vivian was specifically created as a minion of the Shadow Queen to go out and help cause the end of the world. Her rejection of this notion and decision to pal around with Mario is incredibly interesting, especially when you consider the other aspect of her character I've been ignoring. For those who do not know, Vivian is a transgender woman. While a lot of the context was stripped in the English localization of The Thousand Year Door, the other language translations of the game make this aspect very clear. In the Shadow Siren's first fight in Bogley Woods, the text before the encounter is Vivian referring to the group as the Shadow Sisters, before Beldam corrects her to the Shadow Trio. On top of this, both Goombella and Koops are surprised when she refers to the group as the Shadow Sisters. Similarly, Beldam repeatedly insults Vivian throughout the game by calling her a man. In the actual Bogley Woods battle, you can tattle Vivian with Goombella, and she will describe Vivian as feminine before changing to a masculine descriptor. Wow, can we cancel Goombella on Twitter for this? Thank you. These aspects are consistent across all versions except English, German, and Italian. In English and German, the insults were changed to gender-neutral ones, mainly focusing on Vivian's appearance and intelligence. Goombella also redeems herself by being jealous of Vivian's looks. So I guess we can stop that Twitter cancellation, sorry Goombella. This has led fans to very reasonably assume that Vivian is transgender. Other people, who definitely have a blue checkmark on Twitter, see Vivian as more of a femboy character. They probably claim this because of Vivian's Japanese catch card in Super Paper Mario, which refers to her character with a cross-dresser archetype. I reject this premise for a few reasons. First, it was 2004. So explicitly calling a character transgender would have created a massive controversy. The reason so many characters act transphobic is because that's how trans people used to be seen. They were treated as just cross-dressers and not given the respect they were due. Second, Vivian self-identifies as a woman all throughout the game. There isn't a moment where she secretly slips up or reveals in confidence to Mario that she's actually a man at any point. An example of the trope these people are describing is Chihiro from Danganronpa, a character that still views himself as a man, but pretends to be a woman out of fear. Vivian is content about being a woman in all versions of the game, there's no big reveal about it, but I have to pay special mention to the Italian version, where she is explicitly transgender, mentioning how she used to be a man and is now proud to be a woman. Third, the characters actually do see Vivian as a woman after she joins the party, using the correct pronouns in menus and in cutscenes. Finally, and this is the point that sells me on the idea, there are very strong thematic parallels between her story and game and her gender identity. I will cover it in further detail later, but her role as a Shadow Siren and her gender role are kind of parallel in a way. As I detailed earlier, Vivian's story is one of rejecting a disrespectful blood family and being embraced by a family you choose. This experience is a fairly common one for members of the queer community, where the people that raised them are unwilling to accept an identity not deemed as normal by society. These living situations can often be hostile and abusive, but it's not something that can always be addressed by the individual. Sometimes, the queer person is in a position where they cannot leave. And if they could leave, sometimes they feel as though they're obligated to stay, likely out of guilt or out of fear. Vivian's relationship with the Shadow Sirens encapsulates both a hostile environment and a seemingly inescapable living situation. To understand why, we have to go over the family dynamic of the three Shadow Sirens. While they're sisters, Beldam is treated like the matriarch of the group, acting less like a sister and more like a mother. She hands out tasks and dishes out punishments similar to that of an older family member. Marilyn, while still not treated well, is at least not a victim of abuse. And of course, Vivian is shown no mercy from Beldam. No incident encapsulates this better than the first time the player is meant to encounter them. In Bogley Woods, the trio are actively searching for Mario and his friends. Grotus provided a picture to Beldam, which she lost. She immediately tries to blame losing the photo on Vivian, and when Vivian fights back, Beldam insults her. Later, Vivian will unknowingly find one of Flurry's lost necklaces on the forest floor, attempting to keep it for herself. Beldam scolds her and punishes Vivian by taking away the necklace. Beldam gives the excuse that Vivian lost the picture, so therefore she should be punished. This interaction, despite being in a Mario game, is upsettingly realistic in its depiction of familial abuse and gaslighting. Vivian has done nothing here, and yet she is blamed and punished for what seems to be no reason, at first. Then, you remember Vivian's identity, which Beldam is actively combative against. If Vivian's gender identity doesn't matter, then it's kind of a strange coincidence that the object Beldam punishes Vivian over is a piece of jewelry, an object that is explicitly feminine gendering. We know it's feminine in nature because it's Flurry's necklace, and Flurry is, you know... We see another example of abuse at Twilight Town. This incident involves the Super Bomb Bomb, a weapon made by the Shadow Sirens to defeat Mario. Beldam was the one carrying it into Twilight Town, and she's the one who dropped it. Instead of owning up to her mistake, she forces Vivian to find it while Marilyn and her go take a nap. You have to remember that Beldam insults Vivian this whole time, in all these sequences. In this case, it's to the point of tears. While it's generally seen that the insults are gender neutral in the English translation, I don't really think that's the case here. Beldam repeatedly claims that Vivian is ugly and ditzy, and if you interpret these lines in a way that's supposed to be transphobic, like the other translations, Beldam is mocking Vivian by implying that she's not a good enough woman. Beldam is cruelly trying to imply that Vivian does not pass as her chosen gender identity, which is a very common fear held by a lot of trans individuals. The scene in Twilight Town to me reads as Beldam going, "Well, if you're such a woman, then surely you must have been the one to drop this because you're so ditzy." It's a transphobic excuse to be abusive. After this event, Mario helps Vivian find the Super Bomb Bomb, consoling her in the process. Then the two of them decide to travel together. There's something in particular I want to discuss about the plot of Chapter 4 that I don't really think fits anywhere else in this video. At the halfway point of the chapter, Mario's identity gets stolen by Dupless, and when you find Vivian, she repeatedly insists that she should help you out. Why I think this series of events is so interesting is because Mario is helped by Vivian after his identity is stolen, insisting that it's more important that he gets it back than the fact that she's being abused by her family. This pretty explicitly reads as Vivian valuing the importance of somebody's personal identity over all else. Which I think makes a lot of sense for a transgender character. Being able to decide her identity is what helps her feel okay in her own body. So when Mario has his identity of choice forcefully ripped from him, that strikes a chord with her. Speaking more of Mario's involvement, I want to talk about Vivian's eventual choice to leave the Shadow Sirens and her emotional conflict about it. She sticks with him until she finds out that the person she was helping was Mario, running away. Interestingly, she's not mad at Mario for this, but mad at herself. She specifically calls herself an idiot for even going along with this. This is a pretty typical mindset for victims of abuse. Often, they see themselves as the problem before all else, trying to justify why they would be treated this way in their head. And even though Mario explicitly isn't abusive to her, she's conditioned to think he would be because he's the bad guy. After thinking it through for 2 turns, she comes back to permanently join the party. This event and the eventual reveal that she was created by the Shadow Queen relate back to her gender in a very interesting way. Vivian is a Shadow Siren, a creature that was created by the Shadow Queen to expand her influence. They function more or less like her top minions. Because of this, the only people Vivian has ever known are Beldam and Marilyn, who objectively treat her like garbage. She still sticks by them though, until Mario comes along. Victims of abuse may stick with their abusers for a few reasons, but the one that's most applicable here is the feeling that they have to stick with who is hurting them. Beldam and Marilyn are family after all, even if they treat her horribly, since, you know, they're all Shadow Sirens. Speaking of that, Vivian was explicitly assigned to be a villain at the start of the game by the Shadow Queen, but even as early as Chapter 2, it's kind of clear she doesn't want to be a villain. She's not particularly strong, being the frailest of all your party members, and she doesn't show much of a desire to harm innocent people, only attacking in self-defense. Even in the Boggly Woods fight, it's kind of obvious she's being goaded into attacking by Beldam. She's being forced to fill the role of the villain that was assigned to her. She was created as a Shadow Siren, so that's what the world expects her to be. When she is left alone and treated like an actual person by Mario, we see a shift in her thinking. We see this crescendo in the Dupless battle, where she realizes that she wants to be happy, not miserable performing a role she was assigned. Vivian isn't a man. Vivian isn't a villain. Vivian is whoever Vivian wants to be. The thematic parallels between her role in the plot and her gender are very clear. She is expressing who she wants to be while going directly against the people who expect her to be a certain way. These themes are inherently queer, in my opinion. There's a reason that so many transgender people strongly relate to Vivian's story, because for many, it's a story they've experienced themselves. With the Thousand Year Door remake coming out this year, this discourse will probably flare up once again, but the main thing I'm hoping for is that these aspects will be properly expressed in the English version of the game. I don't want the subject of Vivian's gender to be something lost to the GameCube era buried in non-English translations. I want Nintendo to keep Vivian trans. This video is only possible thanks to my members on YouTube, so shouts out to ItsJoeYo and SomeNess, your support means the world to me. If you want to catch more analytical content like this, then please hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. My goal for 2024 is to reach 10,000 subscribers, which is a lofty goal I know, but I want to put my all into content this year. I've been Lexi, and I'll see you next time.